Welcome to the Becoming Superhuman podcast, where we interview extraordinary people to bring you the skills and strategies to overcome the impossible. And now, here's your host, Jonathan Levy.
This episode is brought to you by Health IQ, an insurance company that helps health-conscious people like runners, cyclists, weightlifters, and even vegetarians get lower rates on health insurance. You know, if you listen to this podcast, you probably are healthier than your average person. So why should you pay the same amount as everyone else for health insurance? 56% of Health IQ customers can save between 4 and 33% on their life insurance. And Health IQ can do this because they use science and data to secure lower rates on life insurance for health-conscious people. It's an amazing service. And in fact, they are actually the fastest growing life insurance company with over $5 billion in coverage. So to check them out and to see if you qualify, go ahead and get your free quote today at healthiq.com/superhuman, or just mention the promo code superhuman when you talk to a Health IQ agent. This episode is brought to you by Organifi. You guys, one of the only things that every nutritional expert that we've had on the show seems to actually agree on is that we all need to eat more vegetables, eat more greens, eat organic, cut out all the processed junk. Well, who has the time, right? Who has the time to go out, do the shopping, make the salads, make the juices, make the smoothies? And that's what I love so much about Organifi. Their product is an all-organic green juice. It has all of the nutrients that you need. It tastes absolutely amazing, and it's made by wonderful people who I consider to be personal friends. And as listeners of this show, you guys can actually save 20% on your first order. And all you have to do is go to Organifi.com. That's ORGANIFI.com and use the coupon code SUPERHUMAN at checkout. Greetings, super friends, and welcome to this week's episode. You guys, in a recent episode, I went on a full-on rant about writing and why it's such an important skill and how it can dramatically impact your life and change the way you think. Well, today we are joined by a real-world example. His name is Benjamin Hardy, and on the outside, he is an everyday Ph.D. student working his way through a Ph.D. in psychology, organizational psychology. But if you dig a little bit deeper, you will realize that Benjamin is actually the #1 writer on Medium.com, which through a crazy series of events ended up landing him in Fortune, Forbes, Entrepreneur, Fast Company, Business Insider, Psychology Today, and more. It landed him a $250,000 book deal. And that is just the start of what his writing has done for him. So in this episode, we talk not only about his psychology research and some of the things that he has discovered, we also go into willpower and why, as his book says, willpower doesn't work. We start to understand why it is that we all fail at our New Year's resolutions and what we can do instead. And then on top of that, we go through just this amazing case study of what happens when you combine an aptitude for learning like Benjamin's and what I call an exponential skill, in this case, writing. So it's just an amazing case study in super learning applied and what you can do if you master one of these core exponential skills. I know you guys are going to enjoy this episode. I didn't do a whole lot of talking here. I just sat back and listened to Benjamin. I recommend you do the same. Mr. Ben Hardy, welcome to the show, my friend. How you doing today?
I'm doing awesome, man. It's good to be here with you.
Absolutely. I am really excited, and I feel like we are speaking at the perfect time because yesterday I recorded a podcast on something I call exponential skills, and I went into one of them, which is writing. It's a skill that amplifies your ability to do everything else. And I'm so honored to be with someone who has built up such an incredible body of writing. Tell our audience, for those who don't know, I've kind of spoiled the surprise, but who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, I'm Benjamin Hardy, finishing up my PhD in organizational psychology. I'm super close. I study the psychological differences between entrepreneurs and wannabe entrepreneurs. And over the last a little over 2 years now, I've been the number one writer at medium.com. And my first major book comes out in 2 months. It's called Willpower Doesn't Work.
Wow. Okay. So there's 3 major touch points that I want to make sure to talk about. The first one, entrepreneur, let's just go right at it. Entrepreneurs and wantrepreneurs. I love that term. I've always talked about wantrepreneurs, and people have always asked me since I started companies at a very, very young age, what makes me different? If I'm different, how do people become entrepreneurs? Tell me kind of a little bit about your research and what you found.
Yeah, for me, obviously this isn't a catch-all, but I think this is true of many, many people. In my research, I basically found that the main difference is what I call the point of no return. And what the point of no return is, it's the moment in which a person changes their view of themselves. So like a lot of people, they say, I want to be an entrepreneur, but what's the moment when they actually view themselves as an entrepreneur? And that's what I call the point of no return. And how do you create that moment? How do you create that identity shift? Very rarely does it happen as the product of something outside of you. So I'll just give an example. One guy said his point of no return was the moment his brother committed suicide. So his brother killed himself, and then he had this deep moment of reflection. He realized that life was short, and therefore he decided to pursue his entrepreneurial dreams and never went back. That's the rare outlier experiences. You shouldn't have to wait. That's like an addict trying to wait for rock bottom. You're trying to wait for something outside of you to happen. Most of the entrepreneurs who had point of no return experiences, and really what a point of no return is when you become so committed to your goal that you can't go back. What that was for most people that I interview is when they become financially invested in their dreams or in their goals or in their business. Once you invest in something, you experience what economists call sunk cost bias, which means that you start to wrap your identity around that thing. It becomes super hard to uncommit, which can lead, obviously, entrepreneurs down bad paths, but it's essential to become that level of committed. So really short is just, when someone starts investing in their goals or in themselves or in their dreams, they begin to view themselves as that thing. They become more committed, and then they end up taking on the risk that's necessary.
I really like that. I was trying to think about my points of no return. I started out with entrepreneurship. My first little business venture was when I was 4 years old. So I don't think I could remember it. But you're right. There have been, I think, a lot of points of no return during my journey as an entrepreneur. One of them being external, which was I couldn't get a job at Jamba Juice, or Togo's, actually. They told me I wasn't Togo's material. But besides that, the rest of them were all these internal moments where I realized, hey, you know what? I want to do this. I want to create this. And the only way I'm going to do it is by creating, by entrepreneuring. I think that's really, really interesting. What would be your piece of advice for anyone out there who's thinking, because I don't believe that entrepreneurship is for everybody, but I believe that it's for way more people than realize it. I think way more people can be entrepreneurs than allow themselves to believe. So I wonder, what is your piece of advice out there? What's kind of a litmus test that people can do to determine, are they an entrepreneur or will they forever be cursed to the role of wantrepreneur?
I mean, just going back to, the fastest concept that I have found. Obviously, there's a multitude of ways you can subtly get to the point where you convince yourself to try. But I think the fastest way is just to begin investing money into your entrepreneurial goals. So when I started writing, for example, I started writing in the spring of 2015. Well, I had started blogging, I should say. And in April of 2015, I bought an online course. That's what started it all. I had wanted to blog for a while, but had never started. And so I invested $200 into that goal. And then I educated myself a little bit. So it was kind of the combination of first investing actual dollars into the goal of becoming a writer, and then actually educating myself on how to do it effectively. And that's what led to some fast results. And then, obviously, the more further along the road you go, the more you invest in either your company or your skill sets or whatever. So I would say just start investing dollars into that thing. And what happens is that when you invest money into something, especially yourself, you shatter your subconscious, belief system, because most people they don't believe they can do what they want to do, especially if it's a big thing like that they've never done before. Their subconscious belief systems are really negative. They don't believe they can do it. And so what happens when you invest in yourself is you shatter that belief system and you upgrade your sense of what you can do. And that's what's required in a lot of ways to actually do it.
Wow. Now, just to clarify, that course that you purchased, was that a course on writing?
Not exactly. It was actually a course on guest blogging. It was by John Morrow. I don't even know if it's still available. Yeah. So John Morrow, he's like the guest blogger guy. So I took the $197 course, watched the first 3 modules was all. I don't even know how many modules were in it, but the first 3 were all I really needed, which taught me how to write headlines, taught me how to pitch articles onto different platforms, and just kind of gave me the initiative to do it. And so then I started pitching myself onto low-level self-improvement blogs, wrote like 20 articles in the frame of like a month. And then in so doing, kind of got myself into flow, learned how to write viral stuff, and then all of a sudden started writing viral stuff.
Okay, very cool. Now, this is a perfect jumping off point. First off, really interesting about Medium. For folks who don't know, Medium is kind of a place where instead of having your own blog, as I understand it, you share articles, and it's kind of just this open website where anyone can submit and the top content gets voted to the top. Take me through that process of really putting yourself out there for the first time and sharing your thoughts and ideas in public on the internet for the first time.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, when they start to do that, it really is kind of a freaky experience. You have all this, again, psychological baggage that's holding you back. So you're worried about what people think. You're worried about what your friends think, your spouse thinks. Usually it's literally the people who are closest to you. I think that you're worried about what they're thinking, Now, let's just say you read a blog post and share it on your Facebook. You kind of, you just don't, a lot of people, you just don't want to be that guy, who's like, oh, this guy's now sharing his thoughts on the internet. I had wanted to be a writer since 2010, and I'd, spent my, from 2010 forward, I've been studying psychology, personal development. And then it was over the course of finally deciding I wanted to not just like study great works of self-improvement or stuff like that, and started to actually study the business of it. How do you actually build a blog? How do you become a marketer? How do you write viral articles? And then buying online courses and studying the people who actually taught that stuff. That's kind of the transition I think that's necessary, is when you really start to study the craft, not just studying or consuming the craft. And that all happened for me at the end of 2014, beginning of 2015. And then it was just investing in the course. So to answer your question more directly, I started just publishing for the first time on different platforms. That's where the whole guest posting thing came from. I wasn't even really publishing on my own blog, really. And then I learned about medium.com and found out that I could copy paste articles into Medium. And so that's what I started doing, was just publishing into Medium. And I saw, I didn't really know what Medium was. I just saw it as a place where it was just another blogging platform, but it was kind of in the form of a social media site. You make your profile, but it's a social media site specific for blogging. And as you said, you can share and clap things or like things. And the popular stuff goes to the top. So it allows you an opportunity to have your work spread. I just blogged there for literally a month before my first article went super viral on that platform. But it was because I was pitching it so many other places that I think I was able to do that.
What was that article?
That was an article called 8 Things Every Person Should Do Before 8 a.m. It got published in June or July of 2015. And it was the top article on the platform for probably a year and a half.
Wow.
And that's kind of what opened me up to blogging on higher level platforms and ultimately becoming, writing what I do now.
Right. So I want to ask you, and I'm going to try as hard as I can not to give you leading questions, but I want to ask you how writing and becoming a writer has changed your thought process, and then also how has it changed your life?
Yeah, no, I love it. So I was serving a humanitarian mission from 2008 to 2010. And I was reading all sorts of amazing books, stuff like Stephen R. Covey. And I read an article. It was actually more of like a spiritual type article, but it was a person talking about the results that happen in their life as a product of writing in their journal. So they talked about like 10 different things that happen in their life because they started writing in their journal. And they just said, like, over the last 25 years, I've filled out 38 articles, and this is how my life has changed. And when I read that article, it was literally a turning point for me. like some people call certain books like quake books that just shake your worldview. Well, I read that article and it just like, ever since then, I've never stopped journaling. And some of the results that lady talked about in the article were just like journaling provided a platform for her to like set and achieve goals. It allowed her to like deal with uncomfortable or challenging or suppressed emotions. It allowed her to more deeply ingrain her learning. It allowed her, just all these amazing things. And I just believed it when I read it. And so I just started journaling like a madman. And so for starters, I'm a journaler first. And I think the only reason I'm able to write the way I do is because I journal so much. And, I journal. So how has journaling changed, how I think and how has it changed my life? Writing in my journal is how I come up with my goals. It's how I deal with my problems. It's how I write down my ideas. It's how I write my thoughts. And I think that the process of journaling for so long allowed me to become a better thinker and a better writer. And when you think and write well, it just opens up a ton of crazy doors. It opens up opportunities. Well, and really, I think what it teaches you is it teaches you how to learn, and it teaches you how to not make the same mistakes over and over. When you're journaling about the things you're dealing with, you can kind of get clarity and insight and hopefully make plans on how to do things better. And so I think that it was the process of, a lot of people obviously present the idea that you should read books, and that's becoming a very trendy topic is, read a book a week. And I couldn't agree more. But I think that if you're not supplementing that with journaling all the time, then your ability to contain and really become a high level thinker where you're making unique connections and not repeating the same things that other people are saying over and over, that's where it really comes in for me. And I think so, just to finish this thought, is when you become a high level thinker and you can make connections very quickly that other people can't make, that just opens up amazing doors. It opens up awesome collaborations. It allows you, so for me now, I'm, a part of mastermind groups. I'm a part of multiple collaborations with other entrepreneurs. And I think that my ability to think differently and quickly is the product of my writing. And that allows me to actually add a lot of value to some of the collaborations I'm a part of so that we can actually grow things quick.
That's really interesting. You added a whole different layer than I was expecting, which is ability to work through your own internally, like even if you're not writing externally. And I talked a lot in this post that I told you about, which, by the way, you've inspired me to post on Medium. So thank you. But I talk a lot about kind of like the process of when you think about communicating to another person in writing, you have to think in a different way and you have to organize your thoughts and you have to come up with compelling prose. But I think it's really interesting that what you say about even if you write for yourself in your own journal, you're actually gaining so many of the benefits from writing.
Oh, yeah. I think that almost every, and obviously I combine, so it's not just journal writing, but it's how you journal, and I think journal writing in specific environments at specific times. And in, so I don't know if you've read the book by Josh Waitzkin, The Art of Learning, but he's an amazing guy. He's been on the Tim Ferriss podcast several times, and he talks about, having a pre-performance routine, which is what people like Michael Phelps do. They put themselves into a flow state in order to actually perform at the highest level. And for me, in order for these ideas to actually crystallize and to have amazing ideas, I have to put myself into the state to have those ideas. And so a lot of the journal writing session actually, in order for it to be what I wanted it to be, I had to create a pre-performance routine, even for my journal writing, so that I could write from a higher mental state. That's what I try to do with my writing anyways, when I'm writing a blog post on Medium or anything like that is I don't really agree with a lot of the people who tell you that you should write every single day or that you should write 500 words a day. For me, I try not to write anything, especially publicly, unless I'm in the right frame of mind to write something that I think is of a value. And so for me, a lot of my life and a lot of my goals, and it's why I journal, is to, and even just taking on big challenges or doing things that are unique, is to put myself in the frame of mind where I can actually say something that's worth saying.
Mm-hmm. Now, I wanted to add, you also were very humble about kind of the results of all of this, but at the same time, as the saying goes, all wealth comes from writing. I understand you've been able to transform this into a very lucrative business, educating other people on how to write. Yeah,
I have my own ways of making money. My first book that's coming out, Willpower Doesn't Work, I got paid $250,000 to write that book. Now that my platform's like triple or quadruple the size of that, I know that my next book's going to be a lot bigger. But yeah, I have a lot of people, especially I don't know if you've heard of Genius Network, but Genius Network it's considered one of the highest level entrepreneurial masterminds in America. And I got invited to speak at that annual event, which was, Tony Robbins spoke at that, Peter Diamandis, all sorts of people. And I was able to talk at that event about how I've been able to grow my platform so quickly. Because right now I'm getting about 30,000 email subscribers a month with no paid traffic. And, a lot of people will pay, a lot of money to do that because a lot of people spend a lot of time on advertising. A lot of people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a month to get 30,000 quote unquote leads. So after I shared that stuff, obviously I'm getting lots and lots of very high level people who are willing to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for my help. Problem with all this is that, and I see a lot of people fall into this trap, is that they start their career doing one thing and they get successful at it and it leads to the wrong opportunities. I didn't actually start into writing self-improvement so that I could teach people how to write, although I love doing it just because I think, as you're talking about, it really is a transformational experience. But I do have online courses that I sell to people. I have mastermind groups that I invite certain people to where I teach them these tactics and skill sets and mindsets and things like that. So yeah, writing definitely, I'm still a graduate student, almost done with my Ph.D, but it's definitely opened up, a 7-figure income for me really fast.
Incredible. And all of it comes from writing every single day, or not every single day, but many days.
I do write every single day. I just don't publish every day. I write in my journal every day. And for me, that's where my best writing happens, actually. That's where my best thinking happens. And then I have strategies for turning my journal writing into blog posts. And I actually wrote an article about it on Medium. And maybe, I can share the link with you, but it's called How I Turn Journal Ramblings into Viral Articles. And I take a bunch of pictures of my journal entries and just how sloppy and messy and ugly they are, and just try to explain my process of taking jumbled thoughts and organizing them into cohesive, valuable pieces of content, and then framing those in a way that they can go viral.
Fascinating. So, Ben, I want to talk to you about your book, which originally was the main reason we wanted to have you on the show, because I think, we're recording this in the second week of January. And I think willpower is such a kind of important thing that everyone's struggling with, especially now. This episode will come out likely in March. So how many people, raise your hand, in the audience, if you set a goal, you set a resolution and you haven't lived up to it? Everybody raises their hands. So talk to me a little bit about willpower and what your research has brought up.
Totally. Well, in Western culture, let's just say places like particularly the US and Europe, but it's becoming more pervasive throughout. We are very individualistic in our focus. We're very focused on ourselves. Individualism kind of is the core value or core philosophy. And what that leads to is it leads to self-improvement advice that focuses on the self. Have more grit, have more willpower, have a positive attitude. And the problem with most of these things is it does not work for most people long term. A lot of the research in psychology talks about how willpower is like a muscle. And the more you use it, the more you exhaust it until eventually you have none. And then you just make stupid choices because you can't control yourself. That's kind of what the research says. Mm-hmm. And I agree with it to some extent. The reason I think that happens is because most people operate, well, first off, they're only focused on themselves rather than their surrounding context. So I don't know if you've yet read Ray Dalio's book, Principles. It's a really good book. But one of the things he talks about is that intuitive thinkers focus more on the context of things, whereas more, I wouldn't say generic thinkers, but just as an example, like someone who's less, I don't know about skilled as a thinker, but less able to connect dots. If they're reading an article, for example, and they see a typo, like they see the word there spelled THERE and it's supposed to be THEIR, that will like totally throw them off. Like they'll fixate on that thing and they won't be able to like keep going. Whereas more intuitive, higher level thinkers are more focused on the context of something than the specific details. And really that's kind of required for entrepreneurial thinkers. It's why you hire people on your team to kind of take care of the details, because you're so focused on the big picture. But bringing all this back, I think that one of the many reasons willpower doesn't work is because most people's environment is not letting them work. They haven't created an environment where success is just organic, so they're constantly distracted by their phones. They're constantly, derailed by the food in their fridge. So what my book is all about is about, some of the stuff I talked about before about the power of making, financial investments. putting yourself in unique environments. And once you do that, once you put yourself in certain types of environments, success just becomes easy. From a psychological perspective, we actually outsource almost all of our behavior to our environment anyways. It's why most of our behavior is subconscious. And so when you put yourself, or when you outsource your motivation, when you outsource high performance to certain types of environments, all of a sudden just getting really good big ideas becomes easy. Growing becomes easy. One last thought just from the book, The Art of Learning, again, from Josh Waitzkin. He talks about a concept he calls investing in failure. And he talks about how when he first started out doing jujitsu, he noticed that when everyone was given kind of like free time to like practice and train with other people, most people would gravitate towards other people who are kind of at their own skill level or slightly below their skill level. Like when you're just given free time to practice and train, you kind of just congregate to people who you're like. And that leads to minimal or slow progress. What Waitzkin did was he would always train with people who are way advanced in skill than him. And so he would outsource his behavior to a high intensity environment, and he'd get the crap kicked out of him. He said over and over and over. But what happens is, high level thinkers are very adaptive to their environment. So, by training with people who were at a higher level than he was, obviously he had to learn through failure. He'd get punched in the face, and it's kind of like touching a stove. You have to learn very quickly. And he said he just became a lot more adaptive, and his skill level advanced way faster than most people, because most people don't take on the pain of growth. And so, yeah, I think, trying to bring all this back, focusing on your context rather than yourself is super important, and putting yourself in situations where you don't need willpower, where your desired behavior just happens.
I like that. And I like this. I mean, I've used this, and I always tell people that I'm exceptionally weak. The reason that I stay as fit as I do is I don't have junk in the house, and I don't have opportunities to eat junk. And likewise, I put myself in an environment where the only thing I can do in my office is work. I really like that. And it kind of vindicates me that, we're all maybe a little bit weaker than we think. And willpower is this kind of played up thing that is largely fictional, I think.
Yeah, I love what you're saying. And I think most people who, have experienced any degree of success would agree with you that they are weak when left to their own devices. And so they put systems in place, or they put things in place to kind of shield themselves from that worst side of themselves. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more.
Awesome. Are there any other tips or strategies that you would recommend for helping people stick to the goals that they set? I mean, say people want to work out more, or they want to, as we said, set a goal of sitting down and writing more. What are some of the things that they can do to increase their efficacy and their likelihood of success?
Totally. So there's a concept I go into in the book called forcing functions. And a forcing function is kind of it's more of like an engineering concept. Like think about a microwave. Like a microwave can really only open one way. You can't open it, like vertically or horizontally. It's forced to function a particular way. And really what the purpose of forcing functions is it's to stop the user from making errors. So a forcing function, that you could put on yourself, let's just say, to be more productive at work is to turn off the internet, or leave your phone in the car. Like that forces you from making stupid errors, like looking at your phone or like surfing YouTube. And so I go into, what are the most potent forcing functions. And so, the author or the blogger and entrepreneur, Ramit Sethi, he talks about how, and again, this goes back to investment. And I think if I pound that idea further and further, I couldn't do it even more. But so Ramit Sethi, in order for him to stay committed to working out all year, he actually invests a huge amount of money in a personal trainer, because once he's invested, it kind of forces him to do it. Now, not everyone has that type of money, but you could join a gym. And again, that's probably not even enough for most people, but you could have a workout partner, and you could just embed external layers of support, or, what I would call a forcing function to get you to do it. There's another really cool example. So let's just say with writing, if you want to force yourself to write, go to a different environment than one with triggers of addiction. Like you said, in your workspace, you work. But another thing you could do is you could leave the power cable of your laptop somewhere else, and that your computer is going to die in a few hours, and that's going to force you to operate at a higher level. It's going to force you to work because you know that your computer is dying, or just not doing meetings until the afternoon. And you know that, you got a slew of meetings coming in the afternoon. So you better get your writing done in the morning. I mean, I just think doing whatever you can to set an environment up so that you're forced to operate how you want to operate. And you just remove the margin for error. That's kind of like why you would not have crap food in your house, is because you're just removing the errors that you would make in a different environment.
I like that a lot. I want to ask you also if there are any non-willpower related hacks, skills, tips, or strategies that you're using to perform at such a high level.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as I've said, journal writing always is going to be a big part of my life. When I was on my humanitarian mission, there was a concept that I heard. So in the mornings in this particular space, we had time to just study, read books, whether that be religious, spiritual, or just self-improvement or whatever books. And I was told that, it's during that morning time that sets people apart. I was basically told you make or break your mission between 8 to 10 in the morning, because that's the time allotted to us to study. And I noticed that a lot of people just didn't really use that time well. And I just fell in love with reading during that time. And so I actually started waking up earlier and earlier so that I could read more. And I think that's what allowed me to kind of change my goals and my approach and my trajectory in life. And so even still, I apply that principle. First thing in the morning, aside from journal writing, I spend a few hours reading and just learning. And that, the compounded effect of that over years, it's just unmatchable. It's an unfair advantage. And so I think setting your life up so that you're constantly learning, constantly training your brain, constantly upgrading the pool of resources you have mentally to draw from, that's one. Just so setting your life up for learning. One of the things I actually said in the viral article, that's probably one of the highest quoted concepts in that article, 8 Things Before 8 a.m., is just that ordinary people seek entertainment, extraordinary people seek education. And so I think just orienting your life towards learning is one. Another just non-willpower concept is just the idea of giving. So Joe Polish, he's the founder of Genius Network. He always says life gives to the giver and takes from the taker. It really matches what Zig Ziglar once said. And he said, you can get everything you want in life if you help other people get what they want. And I'm really learning more and more that that's true. I think most people, when they set out on their own entrepreneurial goals, or when they start out as a writer, or when they start out on any path towards success, they're very focused on themselves. They're focused on their own goals. They're focused on what they can. And in a lot of ways, that's kind of the first step. You kind of have to develop some capacity and some connection. You've got to develop the ability to do something well in order to be able to contribute. But what I'm finding at the higher levels is that my goals are shifting. Obviously, I still have my own goals. I still want to write many, many books, and that's going to be something I will do. I want to keep growing my own platform, keep studying things that are important to me, but I'm also finding that my goals are very much starting to focus on helping other people achieve what they want and helping the right people, or the people who I want to learn from, helping them in dramatic ways. That's been an amazing way for me to very quickly develop mentorships with essentially anyone I want, is developing capacities that they need and then helping them achieve their goals. And it just opens up amazing doors. So, I mean, I think that really becoming a giver and, there's a really hard transition, but getting to the point where you really are invested in your relationships, you're invested in other people, you're invested in their goals, and you help them. And once you do that, success becomes a lot faster, it becomes a lot easier.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I've so enjoyed just your perspective, and really, I think you're really a case study in super learning, if I can claim you as one, because, you set out not so long ago with this goal, and systematically, step by step, through first off learning about human behaviors and learning about organizational psychology and setting goals and setting objectives, designing your environment. But then through learning, as you said, these high level performers, they seek education. And by seeking that education, you've built a career when in fact, you're supposed to be a starving graduate student right now. I just think it's such an incredible case study in the power of accelerated learning. And if you set down and you're able to learn things effectively, holy crap, compare you to the next Ph.D. student to come after you,
Yeah. I mean, I think that one really awesome aspect of learning, well, it's really, a few ideas. One is, so Albert Einstein, he came up with all of his famous papers when he worked at a patent office. He was not working in an academic setting. And I think being in a slightly unique environment allowed him to see things differently than other people. If you're thinking the same thing as everyone else is thinking, you're going to come to the same conclusions. Ryan Holiday, the author of The Obstacle is the Way, he said, if you read the same books that everyone else reads, you're going to have the same thoughts that everyone else reads. And ultimately, you're not going to be able to make unique connections. And I was on a flight just like 2 or 3 days ago, and I had spent a ton of time over the last week reading Ray Dalio's book, Principles. And when I read, or I actually usually just listen to an audiobook and I have my journal open, and I write down core insights I'm getting from the book, but I also just write random thoughts related to my business, my relationships. Something that James Altucher wrote in his book, Choose Yourself, is that it's a really good practice to come up with 10 ideas every day. Mm-hmm. And I found that I come up with my best ideas while I'm actually listening to an audiobook with my journal in front of me, where I'm just like, I'm just writing it, because when I'm listening to a really high level book, it just primes my mind to think on a higher level. And I'm writing about my goals, or I'm writing about my relationships. I'm writing about things I'm trying to accomplish. It just allows me to open up the door for a lot of really cool ideas. But it was interesting because I was listening to that book, and I actually find it to be a really good book. And then I started listening to a different audiobook, and I'm not going to actually name it just to be nice. It's a new book that just came out, and it's all about goal setting. And I listened to the first hour, and then I stopped because I realized that everything in that book was a repeat of something I'd already heard. And it was a repeat of a lot of just the common cliches that are in this space. Of course, he talked about Roger Bannister and the 4-minute mile. I mean, he talked about just all the things that are the core. I mean, it's just like, I was listening to the book and I was just thinking, there is nothing new in this book. It's all repeat. And I think that it's an important thing when you're thinking about learning, or if you're thinking about doing some form of work. As Benjamin Franklin said, whatever you are, be a good one. That you obviously know your niche. If you want to know your niche, you want to know what everyone kind of believes, or the core concepts, the core history, the core ideas. And then you want to think about, what's wrong with this, or what's different, or how can you upgrade it? And you definitely don't want to just repeat what everyone else is already saying and try to just spin it a little better, because that's incremental improvement, and if you've read any of Peter Diamandis' work, incremental improvement is one of the biggest problems in Silicon Valley. A lot of people are just trying to make iterative progress on stuff that already exists, rather than trying to make revolutionary products that actually transform, how human beings evolve. And again, as Peter Diamandis said, if you're not disrupting yourself, someone else is. That's one of the things that I try to do. And I think it allows me to learn better. I've been sitting in an academic environment for 4 years, but I am not an academic at all. In fact, it's possible I might be getting kicked out of my Ph.D. program at the very end of it because I'm just too disruptive for that environment. I will finish my Ph.D., don't worry. I think being in that space has allowed me to think differently, even though I'm not an academic in any form. It's allowed me just to think differently than most of the people who are trying to write self-improvement stuff. And so I just think that that's a core aspect of learning, is creating connections and seeing things that other people don't see.
I love that. I really, really love that. I love the juxtaposition of I was going to say, you're probably not your typical academic.
No, I literally am on the possible brink of getting kicked out. And it is my fault because, when you're an entrepreneur and when you're just you get so excited about progress, sometimes you're a little too ambitious. Actually, one other psychological concept, and it really relates to the point of no return I was talking about before, is that all goals, all behavior is one of two things. You're either approaching something or you're avoiding something. You're either trying to have something happen or you're trying to avoid something from happening. That's how all behavior is. In this conversation, we're both trying to have an awesome conversation. We're also probably potentially trying to avoid looking stupid or whatever, but all behavior is either approaching or avoiding something. And most people have a really high avoidance kind of, I wouldn't call it personality, but approach. And so they're more focused on the risks of anything that's happening, rather than the rewards. And entrepreneurs obviously are willing to take risks to achieve rewards. They're also, smart at creating systems to reduce the risk. But what I have found in my own self, and by the way, when you're very reward focused, it can lead to impulsive behavior. If you think about the dopamine centers in your brain, it's seeking rewards that leads people to addiction, stuff like alcoholism, but it's also seeking rewards that lead you to be aggressive towards your goals. And actually, one of the things that Ray Dalio said in his book is that, if you're super reward focused, it will lead to problems. It will also lead to success, but you ultimately have to learn how to deal with mitigating your risks, or else you won't get that far. But lately, I've been experiencing just extreme growth personally, and it's led me to be, I would say, a little more ambitious, a little bit more perhaps impulsive, and just sticking stuff online. Ever since I've been in my PhD program, I've had to kind of walk on eggshells to kind of be careful what I say, because I represent the university right now. But I've been a little bit more, I wouldn't say outlandish, but a little bit more aggressive. And yeah, it's freaking the people out in the university, and they're not sure what to do with me.
I think that's a good position to be in. I don't think you should change anything you're doing.
Well, luckily, the people who I respect are the ones that tell me that. So I appreciate that.
That's awesome. Benjamin, I want to give you an opportunity. You said your book's going to be coming out in a little bit. This episode will likely come out in March of 2018. So I want to give you an opportunity to let people know where to reach out, where to learn more about you, all that good stuff.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, if you go to benjaminhardy.com, by March, that thing will be a little more normal. I've actually had to kind of take down my website for a little while just because of the stuff I'm talking about. But yeah, Willpower Doesn't Work is the book. It comes out March 6th. And I honestly think it's going to be one of those books that sticks out this year for a lot of the people who study business, self-improvement, entrepreneurship, because I've attempted the best I could to present things in a different way than people have been talking about for the last decade over and over and over. So yeah, definitely, if you're open to it, check out Willpower Doesn't Work. If you want to read my articles, you can always see them on medium.com.
Awesome. And Ben, one last question I want to ask you before we let you go. And that is probably a tough one because we covered so much ground, but what would you hope for people's number one takeaway to be from this episode?
I would say probably, if you're wanting to do something, let's just say start a business or start a blog, and you haven't done it yet, you would fit in the camp that I would, we talked about earlier, the wantrepreneurs. You're probably heavily focused on the risks involved in attempting what you want to do. And the reason for that, I would say, is because, and we already talked about it, your subconscious belief system is stopping you. You've got the low level beliefs. And in order to really shatter those, you've got to make investments in yourself. You've got to start studying, reading lots of good books, but I would also say investing in your education and investing in your relationships. And when you do that, and even investing in your goals. So let's just say if it is to start a business or to start a blog, you want to actually start putting dollars into that thing, and then educating the heck out of yourself, and then investing in relationships with mentors who will help you get there faster. So invest in yourself, invest in your relationships, and invest in your capabilities. And when you do that, that is how you go from dreamer to doer. That's how you stop focusing so much on the risks. That's how you start realizing the rewards. And so, yeah, I would say that's the biggest takeaway.
Awesome. Ben, I want to thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. I really enjoyed our conversation. I know our audience did as well.
Awesome, man. Talk to you soon, and thanks for having me.
Pleasure. All right, that is all that we have for you guys today. I want to give a very special thank you to this episode's sponsor, Health IQ, the health insurance company that helps health-conscious people save on their life insurance using science and data to assess the fact that health-conscious people have lower risk and therefore should get lower rates. Remember, guys, to see if you qualify, go ahead and get your free quote today at healthiq.com/superhuman, or mention the promo code superhuman when you talk to a Health IQ agent. I also want to remind you guys that if you were inspired by this episode, if you've been inspired by the idea of learning faster and remembering more and accelerating your capacity to learn, then I strongly encourage you guys to join me for a completely free 1-hour training seminar where we will go into speed reading and memory techniques that will allow you to do all of the above. To check that out, simply visit jle.vi/webinar. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning in to the Becoming Superhuman podcast. For more great skills and strategies, or for links to any of the resources mentioned in this episode, visit www.becomingasuperhuman.com/podcast. We'll see you next time.